live in 1 minute. Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live at pghcitypaper.com. Email your questions and comments to Lynn at pghcitypaper.com.
All right, I don't know if it's my ear or my headphones. One of my ears is on the fritz. I think it's my headphones. Hello, how you doing? Welcome to the program. Lynn Cullen Live. Can you see that sign anymore? Not really. Okay, and we need a new one. Anyway, you can call. Nobody called yesterday. Did anybody call yesterday? I don't think I did. I felt very bereft. Okay, phone number is 412-16. I never call it, so how do I know? 3381. 316-3381. And it's okay. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Okay, guys. So what do we talk about? There are a number of possibilities. Did you see the ACLU is suing the state of Michigan? Everybody else is just, this is awful, and God bless the ACLU. They just jump right in and say, we're suing the pants off you SOBs, and here's what's going to happen. And when we win, we will be assured that this will be fixed, and the people of Flint will pay not one penny for the fix. Our lawsuit is asking a federal court to replace the pipes and to reconfigure the entire pumping system. We'll see. We'll see how this goes. But that's why I love the ACLU. You know, they come in. They often take on things. Like, this is a big, high-profile thing. But something that was not on anybody's radar here in Pennsylvania, and I just want to remind you of it, was, let's say you get arrested. And let's say you are mentally ill. Now, what should happen to you if a person is mentally ill? Let's say a homeless person shoplifts something. They're grabbed. They're stuck in a jail. They certainly have no means to get themselves out. According to law, if you are mentally ill, you are supposed to be put in a special forensic facility where you will be tested, and it will be determined whether you are capable of making your way through the criminal justice system. The ACLU started hearing horror stories. The ACLU of Pennsylvania started hearing horror stories about what was going on in this state in regard to people who are mentally ill but find themselves unhappily in what passes for a criminal justice system. So just last October, November, December, January, just less than 4 months ago, the ACLU of Pennsylvania filed a suit on behalf of the hundreds of people with severe mental illness who are incarcerated in Pennsylvania, even many of whom have never even had a trial. Who cares about these people? Nobody cares about these people. These people are the lowest of the low, the least of us. And since we barely take care of the people that those people would consider rich, you think we're going to take care of them? What happens is they get in, the judge takes one look and says, this person needs to be remanded immediately to one of the state forensic hospitals operated by the Department of Health. No, of Human Services. That's right. It was the Department of Human Services in Pennsylvania. So they are ordered to put this person in one of those mental health facilities. Guess what? There's no room. All the beds have been filled for years. There is a waiting list of desperate mentally ill people incarcerated in our jails trying to get to step one of their journey through our criminal justice system. There are two such state hospitals. There's one in the east, and there's one here in the west. That's Torrance. You probably hear that, Torrance, on, in a news story here and there. So what happens? Because there's no room in the hospital that these people, that the judge says, get these people in there, get this person in there. There's no room. So what happens to them? They throw them here in the county jail. They throw them in county jails all over this state. And because they're mentally ill, they put them in solitary confinement. And guess what happens? They get worse. They get a lot worse. They get sicker and sicker. They get no closer to treatment. They get no closer to a trial. There are people who have been convicted of nothing, who spend years in a county jail in this state with their demons. So the ACLU, hearing one horror story after another, says to the state, we're suing you. You do something about this, and do something about this now. Unbelievably, the state capitulated almost immediately. And earlier this week announced that they would agree they're going to add 200 more beds, some in group homes, some whatever, but start getting these poor, tortured souls. Tortured first by their illness, tortured much further by the criminal justice system and by the political leadership, or lack thereof, of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So they're going to start fixing this, and they're going to start fixing it pretty quickly. And a lot of people's nightmares are going to start coming to an end. That's the ACLU. There was one case that led to this, which if you read about it, you just want, okay, here it is. He has a pseudonym to protect his identity. His name is J.H. in all the legal filings. He is a African-American man. He is a homeless man. He is in his late 50s, and he suffers from schizophrenia. Okay? Here's a guy with a lot. And he was charged with retail theft. He stole 3 peppermint patties. He spent over a year. He spent 383 years in the Philadelphia Detention Center awaiting a bed where his schizophrenia could be cared for. Another plaintiff that the ACLU took on, known as Jane Doe, waited 531 days in a Philadelphia jail before convicted of nothing. It's unbelievable. I first heard about these conditions and this at an ACLU board meeting earlier, before the ACL. We were on the board informed that this suit was going to be brought, and one of the attorneys came in to tell us about it. And I have to tell you, I sat through her presentation, and I didn't know. I mean, I felt like I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. The level of cruelty, the level of total miscarriage of justice. And you just hear one case and then another case and then another case. And you know that this is replicated thousands upon thousands upon thousands of times all over. The much maligned ACLU. I will tell you until I'm blue in the face to, even if you ain't a joiner, join that. Be a member. If you have any charitable inclinations, send them money. They don't have money. They live off of donations from people, and every once in a while, a huge win that grants them some legal fees. But often they get nothing. Nothing. Just the knowledge that they've helped a lot of people. ACLU. I'm stunned at how the state, I'll tell you, maybe if we had a Republican governor in the state, that would not have been such a quick win. My guess. And what do you think? There would have been a different person heading the Department of Human Services who probably didn't believe much in human services under a Republican administration because, as I've said till I'm blue in the face, Republicans don't believe in any kind of regulation, which is what the Department of Human Services would oversee. Regulations, would oversee programs that would help people, all the things that Republicans think of as evil. And so Republicans keep shrinking and shrinking the amount of money and resources that can go into helping the least of us. And thus you end up with a poor, sick man spending well over a year in jail for 3 peppermint patties. But he's black, he's homeless, he's just got the short end of the straw in general, so what the hell. Okay. Yeah, and Margie says, so if you think you have it bad. Yeah, these kinds of things help that most important thing that we lose all the time, which is perspective. So my father, my late, great, wondrous, sweet father, got me a subscription to the Wall Street Journal a million years ago, and I still get it. And they put out a magazine, I think about 3 or 4 times a year, and it came Saturday, and lo and behold, here we go again. What's news, it says. Rust Belt rising. I thought, oh, come on, enough of this. And sure, it's about Pittsburgh. It's about the East End. The Ace Hotel. Pittsburgh's East Liberty neighborhood. Cutting edge. City revival. And on and on. They talk about bread and salt. They talk about the East End Book Exchange. They talk about the Kelly Strayhorn Theater. They talk about East End Brewing Company. They talk about Kelly's Bar and Lounge, which is hardly new. And why would... What? Okay, we got a call. Hello?
Hello.
Hi.
Are you still talking about the mental health?
I'm not, but that's okay.
Well, I'm not an expert on this by any means, but my wife works in this field, and that, according to her, all of those state hospitals are supposed to close. I don't know what time frame we're talking about, but she discusses them ending up in prison frequently and expects it to just get increasingly worse. And remember, this is all these places closing are supposed to save us tax dollars.
Huh.
So I don't know what happens when these people end up in prison, but I can assume, given the number of private prisons in Pennsylvania, that somebody's probably going to be making a lot of cash on it.
Isn't it despicable?
So everything about it is pretty sick, yeah. And since nobody gives, you notice, well, I don't know how much reaction you would get, but there's definitely an issue that almost nobody really cares about.
No. People don't care about this unless someone, they don't even know about it and they don't have time. I know.
Right, it's bad enough if you're a sane prisoner. Nobody gives crap what happens to them, how they're treated, like whether there's any sense in just locking them up and throwing off the key forever.
Yeah.
Versus, let alone like these people, which are another step further down.
And stop and think. You haven't... Okay, you steal 3 peppermint patties, you end up in jail, and you're a schizophrenic, and then you end up not just in jail, but in solitary confinement because, you're... I don't know what cruel and unusual punishment means if it doesn't mean that.
No, it's horrifying to say the least, and the fact that there's just no way out of it right now with the conditions of politics and et cetera right now. What's the way out? It's very frustrating.
It's very frustrating, and God help those people. And, I don't know. Thank you.
Yeah. All right,
Thank you.
Bye.
Appreciate it. Bye. You don't know what you're going to do. Yeah, what can we do? I did see some good news. The state Senate gave preliminary approval to an overwhelming approval, but wait till I tell you, to reduce the size of the House. Now, the House already gave this approval. The House has approved this resolution last year. The Senate finally got around to saying, yeah, you're right. And believe me, it's far from a done deal because it has to then go through another entire legislative session where both houses agree, 2 successive legislative sessions, then has to go on the ballot as a resolution, and we, the people, finally would get to vote. And that would be the most overwhelming vote, I bet, ever in the history of Pennsylvania. Do you think that the number of seats in the House should be reduced from 203 to 151? Duh. Even 151 is probably too many. We have in Pennsylvania, we are paying for, here's what we pay for. We pay for the largest full-time legislature in this nation. And look at all the stuff those guys, very well paid, by the way, are doing. Name me something. I dare anyone, tell me something. What is it? What have they done? These well-paid, well-fed, per diemed, up to the wazoo. Tell me what the 203 members of the House of Representatives in this Commonwealth have done. Yeah, I agree. I can't think of a damn thing either. So the Senate said, yeah, cut that House. Obviously, a companion piece is meant to cut the Senate from 50 seats to 37. The leadership of the Senate has yet to take that one up. It was much easier to take the House guys' seats than their own. This would have to be a change in the Constitution, and to change the Constitution, you have to do both chambers approving it 2 years in a row, and then it gets on the ballot, where Pennsylvanians say, "What the F took you so long, idiots?" That would save enough money to, help mentally ill people. It's sort of like, when you have a task, and it is to clean something up. Let's say a room. Let's say it was a hoarder's room. You walk in and you look around and you think, good God, where do I start? That's the way we feel when we look at our politics. Where do we start cleaning this mess up? Well, you can't let the enormity of the task, keep you from taking your first step. Just pick something up and poof, and the next thing, and the next thing. That reduction in size of the most bloated, absurd state legislature in this country is one such step. Okay, that was my good news. I can't help it. Here's something pretty amazing, and I hadn't heard of this guy. So, I guess it was yesterday was International Holocaust Remembrance Day. It's this marking now the 71st anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. So the president went to the Israeli embassy for a event in which 2 Americans were honored by the Israelis, truly honored by the Israelis, by being put on the same list that Schindler is on, which is, of course, the list of, what is the exact designation? Something like righteous among the nations. People, yeah, it is, righteous among the nations. These are people who are so honored in Israel. They are people who are not Jews, who risk their lives to save Jews, often total strangers to them. It's one of those things that if you think, could I ever do that? I mean, the vast majority of us, if we're being honest, would have to say no. And you look with astonishment on such people. So one of these people was in our army, Master Sergeant Roddie Edmonds. And he was captured. He was in a German prison camp. And it was 71 years ago. And he happened to be the highest ranking person that was in this camp. He and about 1,000 other American soldiers that were in this camp were ordered out of their barracks into the outdoors, and he was called forward, and with a gun at his head, he was told by the German officer to identify all of the Jews in the group of American soldiers. And he said, "We are all Jews here." He was not a Jew. We are all Jews here. He refused to identify any Jews. There were plenty. It's believed that he spared the lives, his act of defiance spared the lives of as many as 200 Jews. He never told his family this story. He never told anybody this story. He is now dead. This is a posthumous award. The people who talked were the people who witnessed it and never forgot about it. One who's now 92 years old. He could not believe when he heard, "We are all Jews." The German backed down. He didn't know when he said that if everybody was going to be mowed down or if he wasn't. What an act of extraordinary courage. Master Sergeant Roddie Edmonds. Why don't we know of these people? Also honored was a French teacher from Goshen, Indiana. She was a Mennonite, and she went to France in 1941 on a service project. And she established a home there, and very soon that home she established became a home in which she took in Jewish children. It's unknown how many children she saved, but it was, well, as they say, he who saves one life saves the universe, at great risk to herself. And in fact, the Nazis did grab her eventually and held her. And somehow she was gotten out in 1944 in a prisoner exchange. You know, so often when we celebrate heroic deeds, we think of people who, like, he mowed down an entire, battery of. I mean, I'm not saying that's not amazing and courageous. But these quiet acts of courage, that are never acknowledged. Well, if they are, it's posthumous. That are never spoken of. That the people who in fact do them never speak of. One of her nieces says, we all knew she was a teacher in France that we didn't know. She never said anything. So, that's a good thing. And now I have a sad task. I told you an obituary last week of a guy who I knew who was just might have been one of the sweetest human beings, funniest, cutest. He was a chiropractor. He was born, raised, and died in Squirrel Hill. His office was in Oakland. He treated ballerinas and famous orchestra conductors. At his funeral, a guy who works at the Pittsburgh Symphony said, I mean, they had his number on, they would call him at a moment's notice because a conductor would come in. And I guess we don't realize that when you're doing this, you can end up with a frozen shoulder. And I guess sometimes they are often in great pain. Jeff would be over there in a minute. He tended like daily to Mr. Rogers. I think I told you that. He's just a wonderful guy and a funny guy. And I went to his funeral last Friday. And it was this wonderful laughter, just people telling stories about him. It truly was a celebration. But his wife was not there. And I had looked for her, and her son said, we had to take her to the hospital today. Can you imagine? You're burying your father, and you take your mom to the hospital that day. And she was having some trouble breathing. She'd always had a lot of health issues. She was dead less than 24 hours later. And her obituary is in the paper today. I didn't want to say anything until the obituary showed up, and it has shown up. And like the obituary for her husband, it's a humdinger. It starts, this has to be the only obituary that starts with the word fuck 'em. I mean, it doesn't say fuck 'em. It says M if you can't take a joke. It's clearly fuck 'em if you can't take a joke was often said by Carol Cohen. She was 69 years old. The official cause of death was complications from pneumonia, but she really died of a broken heart, which is absolutely true. And I knew her, but I found things in this obit that I didn't know about her. She came from a rather poor family in Garfield, and she helped raise her siblings. It says here she would treat them to a Pepsi if they went to the store to get her cigarettes. That sounds like her. That sounds like her. And then when she was 17, she must have gone to court and gotten designated as an emancipated minor. She took off. And in 1970, with some friends, she founded a boutique in Oakland. Anybody remember the Opening Night Company? And, of course, she was a hippie, so they're selling hip clothes and all this, stuff. So it's 1970. She was also selling decals with the peace symbol on the background of an American flag. So it was a peace symbol on the American flag. She was arrested. Those were the days, huh? Remember those? Those were the days. Carol was arrested for desecrating the American flag. She was one of the original founders of the Shadyside Arts Festival. So she met her husband. She was married, and he was too, but their marriages were tanking. They both had 2 children, 2 boys. And they blended their families into such a wonderful, wonderful family. So those 4 boys are true brothers. This was a family so suffused with love and fun. One of the stories that somebody told is that Jeff, the father, who was just a child at heart, he would tell one of the younger boys when he would say, "Hey, you want to go to Zelienople?" And the kid would get all excited. And Zelienople, it turned out, was a closet in the house. So they'd go into the closet in the house and play Zelienople. When the poor kid finds out, somebody said, "Zelienople ain't a closet. It's a place. People live in Zelienople." It was like finding out there was no Santa Claus. But in Jeff and Carol's house, there was a Zelienople, and it was in the closet. So she's raising 4 boys, and she still becomes a playwright. And she's writing and writing and writing. Actually, one of her plays was produced at CMU. And then in the mid-90s, God, they always had so many animals. In the mid-90s, 2 of her huge Akitas, those are those big Japanese dogs, were what do you call that when they get trained so that they're able to go to hospitals and therapy dogs. And she would take her Akitas, Arlo and Bartlett, to Children's Hospital, where they would comfort terminally ill children. And she also was a volunteer at 10,000 Villages, which I used to advertise for. You know, she just couldn't do enough good stuff. One of her sons wrote this: "She had fiery hair and a personality to match. She loved a boogie, swore like a sailor, loved desserts, Elvis, dirty jokes, presents, photography, gardening, April Fool's Day pranks, threw legendary parties, and made killer grilled cheese sandwiches." She was in a horrible car accident when she was 18, and for the rest of her life she suffered in a great deal of pain, which is what brought her to Jeffrey and how she met. When they decided to blend their families, they decided they'd buy a house. This is before they had divorce. Their divorces had both totally gone through, but they were together. The kids were with them. And so they bought a house. And at one point, I don't know if it was the realtor said to them, I mean, you are married, right? Because they had different names. You are married, right? And they both, without missing a beat, said yes, which was a true statement. They just weren't married to each other. Anyway, her funeral, God, I can't believe it. In the same place, 1 week later. And it says in the obit, people who are coming are please don't wear black. Please wear colorful clothes if you feel comfortable. Because she was all about bringing color into the world. And she said she would like to thank everyone who pledged to honor Jeffrey's request not to vote for Donald Trump. As you know, that was the last line of his obit in lieu of flowers. Please don't vote for Donald Trump. So she says in hers, she would like to thank everyone who pledged everyone who pledged to honor Jeffrey's request not to vote for Donald Trump. And to Jeffrey's detractors or Trump supporters, it says, beware, because she will likely haunt you until the election. Carol Cohen. Jeff Cohen. What a love affair. And their boys orphaned like that. Bang, bang. It's just... Okay, what we got here? All right, you guys aren't telling me anything I don't know. So, it'll be interesting to see how this thing with Trump plays out, right? The Fox debate tonight without him, the contrary event that he's holding, who knows? People are saying this is either a last brilliant move before voting on Monday in Iowa at the caucuses, or it's going to hurt him. It's unclear which. In some respects, it was tactically, it's a gutsy move. Here's what one person says about it, who heads the School of Media and Public Affairs at George Washington University. The media here have lost some control, clearly. And in losing control, they've also lost some of the dignity that used to attend a presidential process. Now, in that regard, when Fox first held the initial debate that Donald took umbrage at, Megyn Kelly's questioning, I said that was the most entertaining presidential debate I'd ever seen, because Fox is not a news operation. It pretends, takes on the trappings of a news organization, but it's pure entertainment. It's why they're so successful. It's entertainment. And Fox, which has done so much to harm our politics and our national discourse, that has helped drive these wedges between Americans. It's created that alternative universe. And in some respects now, it is party to the loss of dignity, if there is one. Party with Donald Trump and a whole lot of others with the loss of dignity in our national discourse. As I've said before, I think Roger Ailes in history will go down as one of the most consequential, in a totally negative way, consequential Americans in determining the future of the country. He has changed us, and it sure as hell ain't for the better. So this guy says, look, it's an anti-institutional election. And that's the reason Trump and all the others have gained so much traction. But one of the institutions they're running against is the media. So this election is going to further take down, I just wish it would take down Ailes. Front page front page New York Times story about the largest veterans, the fastest growing veterans organization. I'm not talking about VFW. I'm talking about Wounded Warriors. Who doesn't know that organization? No. They have incredibly moving television ads. They're all over the place. I mean, you can't help but note it. The New York Times did a story, big story today, and it's extremely negative about Wounded Warriors and how it's gone awry. One of the reasons we all now know about it, one of the reasons that they have grown so fast is because when you send them money, they are spending it on those slick ads. They are so little of the money is now getting to the wounded veterans. You got to do your research. You got to do some, even minimal research when you're sending your hard-earned dollars off to a charity. And I recommend something called Charity Navigator. If you go to Charity Navigator, I haven't done this, and put in Wounded Warrior Project, they rank with stars, and they have a very specific way of telling. They'll tell you how much of every dollar that this charity, any charity gets, actually goes to what the mission is and why you, the donor, are giving the money. And how much goes to overhead, salaries, this, that, the other thing. Well, I got to tell you, Wounded Warrior Project, I would imagine they have maybe a 1 rating. I don't know. I don't know. Listen to this. I'm just telling you. Don't send them money. There are a lot of organizations out there, Wounded Warriors. Let me just tell you what happened in 2014. They had just come off 10 years of really rapid growth. I mean, they were doing so well. And so every single employee of the Wounded Warrior Project was flown to Colorado Springs, put up at the 5-star Broadmoor Hotel, and they were there for 3 days, 2 nights. The opening night, all these people were brought into a courtyard in this fancy schmancy hotel. And a spotlight shines up at the top of this huge column. A 10-story bell tower. And who is there but the chief executive of Wounded Warriors? And he jumps off and begins to rappel down the tower to the cheers of all the people. When I give to a charity, I don't want the money to go to some crapola like that. It has spent millions and millions on travel and dinners and hotels and conferences. And if it were a fancy schmancy corporation, you could say, all right, okay. But it's a charity that tugs at our heartstrings and wants more and more of our money. A lot of people who used to work there say they would be like flown off to New York to meet with somebody that could have been done in a telephone conversation, and they would fly business class, no problem. They would stay in $500 a night hotels. It's a regular occurrence. They go on in this story to tell such horrible things you can't imagine. Do not give to wounded warriors. One guy who has since left said he was sitting at a desk. He was a vet. He had been increasingly feeling guilty about what he saw going on around him and the waste of money that people sent. And he said one day a child walked in with his piggy bank. And another time, an older woman called to donate a large part of her son's life insurance after he was killed in Afghanistan. And the guy who took in the piggy bank and who took that call said, "It started eating at me. It started getting under my skin. I knew where the money was going. It seemed to me like it was all a big lie." Listen to this. In 2014, the Wounded Warriors Project lobbied hard. That's also where your money's going, paying lobbyists. Lobbied in California and Florida to fight proposals in their legislatures that would have required nonprofits like them to increase financial transparency. The Wounded Warriors Project goes to the California and the Florida legislatures and argues against having to open its books, essentially. And also around that time, it hired one of the richest, fanciest, most expensive public relations firms in the world. The same firm that represents Walmart, Shell Oil, Philip Morris Tobacco, and Starbucks took on the job of improving the public perception of the charity. So those guys are going to be hard at work trying to refute these damning facts in today's New York Times. "18 former employees, many of them wounded veterans themselves, told the New York Times they had been fired for perceived insubordination when they said things like, well, shouldn't this be going? You're gone. At least half a dozen former employees said they were let go after raising questions about ineffective programs or spending. Charity Watch, I mentioned Charity Navigator, Charity Watch, this is a totally independent monitoring group of charities, gave Wounded Warrior Project a D rating. For instance, you send $1 to Wounded Warrior Project because you see them all over the place. They got glitzy ads. They make you cry. You think, oh, my God, I got to send a check. Every dollar you send, easily 40 cents of it goes to lining the pockets of certain people holding lavish parties so the guy can rappel on a spotlight off of it. 40 cents. Now, I got to tell you, that is such a bad ratio. Here's another charity that deals with wounded veterans. The Semper Fi Fund. okay? You send them $1, and 92 cents of it goes to what you want it to go to. The other 8 goes so they can have a roof and a building and can pay a few people some money. It's a hard story to read. Disgusting. Oh, and here's another thing that just broke my heart. Front page, Post-Gazette, sports page. It's for you hockey fans. Penguins. Phil Borque. Pittsburghers love him. Hell of a player. Retired. But he does play-by-play, I think, or color on the radio broadcast, right? So he's still out there. He has said, self-reported, that his head's going. He says, I'm not remembering things, and it's been at least 6 or 8 months. I mean, these are abnormally long gaps in memory. And not being able to recall the simplest things like people's names who you've been around all the time. Complete blanks. We all have that moment, Phil Borque says, when you kind of forget something and it comes right back to you. Now it doesn't come back, and it's actually kind of scary. People that you see every single day, you're like, what's your name? Phil Borque has no idea how many times he was concussed. He says it was definitely over 10. A dozen for sure, he says. But, nobody even paid attention to that stuff, so it's probably well over that. He was knocked unconscious a ton of times. A Pittsburgh Press profile in the 1980s described him as being responsible for more hits than Bruce Springsteen. And he says, I probably lied to the trainer a lot about being ready to return after a concussion because he wanted to get in the game because he was worried he'd lose his job. And here's this sad thing at the end. We know what's happening. He knows what's happening. These are the first stages of CTE. And he says he has not sought medical advice, although he might in the future. Quote, he says, I'm probably like most people. I'll wait a year. And after a year, if it continues, I probably should talk to somebody. Like it won't continue. It's going to get worse, Phil. But I'm stubborn. It probably will take a lot for me to do it, but it's definitely a concern. And he says around his children, his daughter who's 11 and his son who's 9, he says they don't seem to notice it yet. They're young, they're not quite paying attention. I probably cover it up quicker in front of them because I don't want them to think that their dad is losing his marbles. Phil Borque, Randall L., this guy from the Giants who died the other day, 26 years old. What are we going to do? Oh, it's just unbelievable. And if he can't remember things, he ain't going to be able to keep that job he's got. Because if he's doing broadcasting, and broadcasting of that fast-moving game where you got to be bang, 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 bang. So, I'm sorry. Don't shoot the messenger. I just think we need to have the courage to look at this squarely, because we are party to this particular illness, which is finally getting attention and could be stopped. But the only way to stop it, it would seem, is to stop having the fun that we've been having for so long. That's it. I'll see you tomorrow in about 23. We'll do this all over again, and I will look for fun stuff. Come to think of it, that means I should probably look at the Fox debate tonight. I shall. Bye-bye.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper, Steel City Media, and its advertisers.